Hey, I'm Daisy. I am here to do that policy video we have to do. The policy I chose originally was the Clean Water Act of 1972. And then the media I chose this time was a YouTube video, a talk given from John Oliver, just about this time about PFAS, which I'm going to get into now. Just recapping that video and giving some changes we can make. So he let us know that PFAS is a very harmful chemical that are used in non-stick surfaces. Per and polyfluoroalkyl are man-made compounds with a chemical makeup of carbons and fluorine atoms. PFAS and also C8, which is another name for it, are a broad family of chemicals that represent different items like firefighter foam, rain jackets, stain-resistant rugs. The most common item that we know of is non-stick pans and pots. And in the 1940s and 50s, many non-stick items were just making our life easier, right? And this is all thanks to three giants: DuPont, 3M, and Teflon. And basically, they have just been doing a lot of work since around that time. But in 1976, they put out a commercial with this little girl who says, and I'm about to quote, she said, "I used to be a slave to pots and pans, but I've been liberated by Teflon." And John Oliver shows this clip of this commercial and dates it at the top, and it's kind of like jaw dropping. But yeah, this aired, like I said, in 1976. Even though Teflon and DuPont and those in that industry knew that the material they were using and have been for decades didn't degrade in the environment and could increase the size of the liver in rats, rabbits, and dogs. 3M learned of this investigation and that the ingestion of PFAS caused birth defects in rats. And 3M told DuPont, and DuPont did their own research to confirm it, but did nothing to warn the public. And so they kept on using it, and by 1991, DuPont had actually lost control of how much C8 they were dumping into the waterways of their local factories. And this is despite being told that it should not be in groundwater at all. So they lost count of how much they were dumping, even though they shouldn't have been dumping it at all. Okay, cool. And they eventually did more research, and they were able to find a safer product that was similar to the chemicals they had been using, but this posed a risk only to their pockets. Honestly, there was no other reason not to use it, but that is what they used to decide against it. So they did not, make any changes in their policy or productions. They actually had one of their engineers release an ad or video or something, kind of talking about the miracle, if you will, of C8 and PFAS. And this man says that basically he's just marketing it as liquid gold, and he's like, this can stop bugs from crawling up a tree. And what about the invention of leather raincoats, right? So which John Oliver jokingly decides, okay, well, we need leather snakes and a leather Elmo, whatever. What else can we make out of leather? But he goes on and on. This is about a 15-minute video, but he just goes over how in the 70s, DuPont and 3M wanted to do more research of their own to find a control group with clean blood. And though they looked literally everywhere, all over the world, on all of the continents, could find no clean blood except from those of soldiers from the start of the Korean War. Yeah, and so then they also show clips of some of the workers and testers from DuPont and 3M, and yeah, tells about how they have certain cancers now, which was known about in the 40s and 50s. They mentioned a family in the Carolinas who have, or maybe it's probably multiple, who have to test their well water. So they have these systems in their basement with these 4 large tanks to where the water runs through 2 or 3 and comes out the 4th one as a test to see how contaminated their water is, their well water. They have to do this weekly. They have to have someone come in, and it also requires the privilege or the space to have 4 large water tanks in a space in their basement. It's just unfeasible, honestly. But this is something that happens weekly for these residents and honestly could have been prevented. But now getting into the strengths and weaknesses of the Clean Water Act. So the Clean Water Act has been around, like I said, since 1972. And strives to regulate as much as it can, our drinking water. And so some strengths is a regulation. Like we have something in place to stop these harmful actions, right? It's, I would say, protecting those who are honestly the most vulnerable. So we know that factories and dumping and all that happens in poorer areas, right? And so protecting those residents, and then it also makes it illegal to pollute and destroy water areas without permit, makes it illegal to dump and pollute in these water areas. But the same token, some weaknesses is it doesn't do that good of a job. So it doesn't regulate groundwater. Some pushback, I don't really consider it a weakness, but some would say it's actually too strict on all these different industries, which, it doesn't do enough to regulate the companies who have been, like DuPont and 3M, dumping for decades in these waterways. And ultimately, some people still end up with contaminated water. And so we as social workers could honestly step up into this fight as well, by just looking at this as a justice issue, right? And so environmental justice is just as much of an issue as any other justice issue. And so actually the CSWE defines environmental justice as occurs when all people equally experience high levels of environmental protection and no group or community is excluded from the environmental policy decision-making process, nor is affected by disproportionate impact from environmental hazards. Environmental justice affirms the ecological unity and interdependence of all species, respect for cultural and biological diversity, and the right to be free from ecological destruction. This includes responsible use of ecological resources, including land, water, air, and food. So basically, we know that many environmental justices are intrinsically and increasingly connected to social work, and we should be concerned about it. Thank you for watching.